but you don't look Mexican. I've heard that sentence my entire life, usually followed by, really? I thought you were Italian. I'm 5'9", fair skin, and apparently I don't fit the picture many people have in their heads when they hear the word Mexican, which has always made me wonder, what does Mexican look like anyway? More on that later. Because if you looked at me now, there are a few other things you would assume about me too. You might think, I woke up like this, that I'm naturally motivated, that I've always been disciplined, and I came out of the womb lifting something heavy with one hand and levitating with the other. You would be very, very wrong. A while ago, I was looking through old photographs from my childhood when I noticed something I had never really seen before. There was a theme running through almost all of them. I was laying on a couch, watching television, sleeping, lounging somewhere, or just generally looking completely uninterested in whatever the hell everyone else was doing. Looking at those pictures as an adult, I could see something I didn't have language for as a child. I was depressed. I was unmotivated. And I certainly wasn't the disciplined woman you see today. I come from the true immigrant story. I'm first-generation American. I was born here, and I feel equally connected to being American and being Mexican. My parents divorced when I was 5, so much of my childhood was spent inside the matriarchy of our family. My mother, my grandmother, strong women raising children in a country that was still unfamiliar enough to feel scary. And when the world feels scary, sometimes love doesn't look soft. Sometimes love looks like rules, expectations, and discipline. There was protection underneath it, but as a child, I couldn't see that. I just felt trapped. And underneath all of it was another message I couldn't have articulated then, but I could absolutely feel. The message was, you have to make it. Make it. It's such an interesting phrase when you stop and think about it. Make what? Make money? A career? A better life? Become successful enough to justify everything the generations before you sacrificed to get you here? I don't think anyone ever actually defined it, but I could feel the pressure of it. My father came from another version of that same world. He grew up working on a farm in a silver mine. In his words, discipline wasn't a morning routine. In his world, discipline wasn't a morning routine, a productivity hack, or something you tracked on your Apple Watch. You worked because things needed to get done. And if they didn't get done, you might not eat. That's an entirely different relationship with work. So discipline came at me from both sides of my family. And naturally, I rebelled against the whole damn thing. Hard. Because what they experienced as survival, I experienced as confinement. What they believed would prepare me for the world, I wanted to escape. And for a while, my escape took me down some very dark paths. Addiction became part of my story. For years, I would have looked at that chapter of my life as the complete opposite of discipline. But I don't anymore, because addiction requires its own kind of discipline. It has rituals, routines, repetition. You learn how to organize your life around the very thing that's keeping you trapped. And that's the irony I couldn't see then. I rebelled against one set of confines, only to create another. The cage looked completely different, but it was still a cage. Looking backward, I could see something now that changes the way I understand my entire story. I spent years believing I was rebelling against discipline, only to realize I had become incredibly disciplined at destroying myself. Maybe discipline was never my problem. Maybe choice was. As a child, discipline was something imposed on me. It came with rules, expectation, fear, and you have to. So I pushed against it with everything I had. But eventually I discovered that I could choose. I could choose what deserved my discipline. I could choose what I repeated. I could choose what I practiced. I could choose what I put into my body. I could choose how I cared for myself. I could choose what I built. And suddenly, the very thing that had once represented confinement became one of my greatest sources of freedom. Look at me now. I lift heavy. I sit quietly. I study relentlessly. I take care of my body. I build things. I create. I reinvent myself over and over again. Sometimes I think about the little girl in those photographs, lying on the couch, watching television, looking completely uninterested in life. She wasn't missing something everyone else had. The raw material was always there. She just hadn't learned where to point it yet. Because I now know that I have an enormous capacity for discipline. It's kind of my superpower. I can use it to destroy myself, or I can use it to build myself. I can create rituals that numb me, or rituals that bring me back to life. I can repeat behaviors that make me smaller, or repeat behaviors that make me stronger. Same woman, same intensity, different choice. And maybe that's what a pivot really is. Choice. The moment we realize that just because we're moving in one direction doesn't mean we have to keep going that way. We can turn, and that choice creates something I spent so much of my younger life searching for. Freedom. Which makes me wonder about something. What if life has a strange way of introducing us to some of our greatest gifts through challenge first? What if the thing we resist, resent, run, or feel trapped by isn't always something we're supposed to throw away? What if sometimes we're being introduced to a part of ourselves that we simply haven't learned how to use yet? Because the thing I pushed away the hardest became one of the greatest gifts of my life. Discipline became access to my potential. Not my grandmother's version of it, not my father's, mine. Which brings me back to the sentence I've heard my entire life. But you don't look Mexican. Maybe heritage isn't always something you can see. Maybe mine doesn't live only in my skin color, my height, my features, or whether someone thinks I look Italian. Maybe you're looking at it when you see me get up and try again. Maybe you're looking at my father's work ethic, my grandmother's discipline, my mother's determination to keep us safe. Maybe you're looking at generations of people who knew how to survive, living inside a 5'9", fair-skinned woman who eventually learned how to take what they gave her and choose what to do with it. So maybe I do look Mexican. You just might not have known what you were looking for. And that old phrase suddenly means something completely different to me. Make it. For my grandmother and father, maybe making it meant survival. For my mother, maybe it meant safety. For younger me, maybe it meant escape. But today, I get to decide what it is. And maybe that's one of the greatest privileges their sacrifices gave me, the freedom to choose. Your Sunday self-discovery. So now I'm wondering about you. What are you pushing away? What quality, challenge, family inheritance, experience, or part of yourself have you decided is the problem? And what if you've been so busy trying to get away from it that you haven't stopped to ask, could there be a gift in here that I haven't learned how to use yet? Maybe your sensitivity becomes intuition. Maybe your stubbornness becomes perseverance. Maybe your intensity becomes passion. Maybe the thing you once needed to survive becomes the thing you now get to use to thrive. I don't know if life intentionally challenges us first with the very thing that will eventually serve us most, but I sometimes wonder, because the thing I pushed away the hardest became access to one of my greatest potentials. I just had to stop letting someone else define what it meant, and choose it for myself. Because sometimes the greatest pivot isn't becoming someone new. It's finally choosing what to do with who you've been all along.